Uh, so I'm going to show you how to make a gluten-free pie crust. And this will make enough pie dough for a top and bottom crust for a pie. So if you just are making a pie that just is going to have a bottom crust, like a pumpkin pie or something like that, then you just half the recipe. I've got all my stuff here, so you'll notice I've got all my gluten-free flours over here. And then I'm just going to start putting it together into my bowl. We're going to start with the flour blend. And we're going to do a cup of the flour blend. So I've got a 1/3, and making a mess. The thing about baking, you're always going to make a mess. There's no way around it. You can try to be neat as much as you want to, but you're going to get flour everywhere. It's just, that's how it's going to go. Alright, so there's a cup of the flour blend. Then we're going to do 2/3 cup of the tapioca flour. This is a really fine flour that kind of reminds me of cornstarch a little bit because it just gets everywhere like that. I'm gonna have to refill my jars here pretty soon. Alright, so 2/3 cup of that, and then we're gonna put some of the rice flour in. Again, it says white rice flour, it's really brown rice flour, it doesn't really make a difference. I'm going to do a 1/2 cup of that. Alright, so that's all the flours. Now we need a couple more ingredients we're going to put in our xanthan gum. And I need 2 teaspoons of that. The recipe actually calls for 1 teaspoon of xanthan gum and 1 teaspoon of guar gum. But again, there's no difference between the two. They're interchangeable, so since I only have xanthan, I just do 2 teaspoons of that. And then we're going to put a little bit of salt in. It calls for a 1/2 teaspoon, so I just do a couple cranks of salt. Because I don't really want to go through the trouble of measuring that. Sugar's next. So raw cane sugar, 2 tablespoons of that. And then baking soda. I need a 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda. Make sure you're doing soda, not powder. There is a difference. It will mess up your recipe. Okay. So that's all my dry ingredients. I'm also going to put in a 1/2 cup of shortening or margarine. They are the same thing. And it's at room temperature now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of cut it up into cubes and put it into all the flour and sugar and stuff. That's going to get mixed up first. And then I'll add in the wet ingredients and put in a 1/2 cup of milk and a teaspoon of lemon juice to kind of finish up the dough. Alright, so that's going to go in there. You don't really want it melted. The solidness of the margarine is what's going to help the dough form into a solid mass. So we're going to start by mixing this stuff up. Because the butter is still solid, it may get a little clumpy, so you might want to manually mash it with a spatula or something like that a few times if it doesn't seem like it's really getting spread around like it needs to be. But I'm going to let this get mixed up, and then we'll add in the wet ingredients, and I'll show you what the dough looks like as a finished product. Alright, so what you can see so far is it started clumping up a little bit. That's from the butter kind of attaching itself. Still got some big clumps of butter, but that'll get sorted out as I finish it off. But it's got a nice mix to it, so I'm going to put in 1/2 cup of milk and a teaspoon of lemon juice, and then finish mixing it up, and then it will start turning into dough. If you feel like when you're mixing it up that it's not really mixing properly, that you're having a lot of stray flour or sugar along the sides, feel free to stop the mixing and kind of mix it up by hand, kind of pull any of the excess stuff more into the middle of the bowl. And you can do that a couple of times. By the time the pie is done, you see already it's starting to form the dough. By the time it's done, it should literally be one giant dough ball in the middle of the bowl. And then I'll show you how we prep it, because before we can cook with it, it does need to chill in the refrigerator for at least an hour. Dough is finished. Be careful again about your ratios. The ingredients are meant to be exact for a reason. When I first was mixing it up, it was very crumbly. It hadn't stuck together and hadn't actually formed this dough ball that I was looking for. And I've done this a couple times, so I knew what it was supposed to be. So I realized that I had mismeasured my milk content. So I added a little bit more milk, and now it came out to what I needed it to be. Since I am going to be making a pie with a top and bottom crust, I'm going to go ahead and split this into about half for storage purposes. It'll make it a little bit easier. I'm going to kind of just knead it together a little bit, and I'm going to just store it using some plastic wrap. While it's in the fridge, what tends to happen with this dough is it actually gets a little wet. I don't know if it's exuding any moisture or if just being in the cold refrigerator is making it a little damp. But to kind of help with that, what I do is I put a little bit of flour onto the plastic wrap where I'm going to be placing the dough, and then I will put a little flour on top of the dough as well. And it kind of helps to just soak up any moisture that gets released, because if it's really wet, when you pull it out to try and roll it out and actually put on your pie, it's just going to make that process a lot more difficult. So I found that this helps. So I've got it on the plastic wrap, I put my flour down, now I'm just going to wrap it up. Kind of want it as airtight as you can get. It's not going to be like vacuum sealed or anything, so you just do the best that you can. I kind of smush it down to have it sort of fill out the edges of the plastic wrap, and then it's going to sit in the refrigerator for an hour, and I'll repeat the process with the other half of the dough. After it's sat for an hour is when you can start actually baking your pie. So in that sort of interim time, you want to get ready any pie filling or anything that's going to be going into the pie itself, so that everything is just ready to go, be built into the pie and placed in the oven for cooking once the dough is ready. Okay, are you ready? Did you stop smiling like that? It's creepy. Okay. I didn't lay out my plastic wrap for the second piece of dough. You don't have to keep recording your face.